Welcome. I'm Harmony Slater, your host of the Finding Harmony podcast. Over the past 20 years, I've taught thousands of yoga teachers and students to explore the intersection between ancient wisdom and modern everyday life, using mind-body practices to heal, awaken, and manifest their dreams from the inside out. This podcast is a sanctuary for those feeling overwhelmed by life's challenges. Are you ready to jump in and discover how these challenges aren't actually in the way, but are the way to finding harmony? Let's invite the magic back in. Hi, welcome back to the Finding Harmony podcast. Today, Russell and I are meeting with one of our most popular guests from last year, Hector Marcel. Maybe you remember him. If you have not listened to our first episode with Hector Marcel from last year, I would go back and listen to it because it was profound. There was some deep, deep teachings in there. And Hector Marcel is the president of the Three Jewels Tibetan Center in New York City. But he is also a meditation teacher, Buddhist practitioner and Buddhist teacher, obviously. And you can find him on Instagram as Wake Upist. And that's what he considers himself, as someone who is waking you up. And today we are having a very interesting conversation about what happens when our teachers fall or disappoint us. So this fall from grace. What is this fall from grace, and how do we come to terms with it? How do we integrate it into our understanding of spirituality or the traditions or our own practices? And he has some wisdom to share based on his own experience and his own tradition with Geshe Michael Roche. And so we're just going to jump right into this conversation because I know you're going to love it. He's wonderful and a beautiful human being that has so much wisdom and light to share with all of us. So let's jump in. Hi, welcome to the Finding Harmony podcast. I'm your host, Harmony, and I am here today with Russell Case.
Well, Harmony, I just wanted to say that just this week we released our episode with Hector Marcel, and it was very well received, extremely inspiring kind of podcast, actually. And I remember when we walked away from it, we were just kind of vibrating. Like this is such a kind of, when you know you've got a good one,
yeah,
and you've met a brand new friend and you want to spend all your time with them. Well, today we've brought Hector back, and it's to celebrate your mom's birthday. Your mom's birthday was yesterday. That's nice. Happy birthday, Mom, who's passed, but you still get the birthday, I think.
Yeah.
I'm still here, so I'm celebrating. Yeah, we talked about her.
Yeah.
We talked about grief and the rest.
We did.
Yeah, so it was her birthday. I have another friend who's got a birthday at the same day. So secretly, I was celebrating with her in my mind, and then we had a gathering, a bunch of, 20-year-olds having fun on their birthday. It was lovely for me to watch everybody with youth and vigor enjoying their birthday and just thinking, everyone's mum at some point was like that,
I know.
I want to ask you a question about this because I sometimes, we've got our dogs in front of us, and I was just thinking about my own mom as well. And sometimes I stare at them and I get really sad thinking about them because they're just dogs and they die so quickly. And I've got them right here in front of me, and I look at them and I was like, oh, someday she's going to be on a little operating table right in front of me, and I'm going to have to put her down. And I think about it all the time, and it makes my chest physically hurt. And then I think about my mom's the same way. Like I've got to endure that. And I'm not looking forward to it. So I don't know what can be done. I mean, you called it, I'm pre-grieving.
Yeah, pre-grieving.
Is it helpful to?
That's such a good question, because if there's anything at all that we do is avoid that question for most of our lives. And I think that's why people grieve. And I think that's why people get shocked. And I think that's why there's so much suffering. We avoid looking at what's the only reality that we can guarantee is going to happen. And so
Yeah.
you're asking, is there another way to think about that? And of course there is. Now, it sounds strange if you've been indoctrinated into death means I have to suffer and grieve and cry and the rest, right? If we've been indoctrinated, that's the only option. If we've been recording that by watching movies and reading books and fairy tales and seeing people grieve, if that's the only frame of reference, the reservoir of frameworks we have in our minds have available for that inevitable moment, then absolutely we'll grieve and suffer and hurt. But like I was talking about my mum's passing after decades of Buddhist practice, meditating, one of the main meditations being anticipatory death meditation. If you know it's going to happen, run your mind through with some logic, some compassion. And is there a better way to be present while that stuff is happening? And so the mind training sort of wears that you have a pre-grieving process in a death meditation, right? If you do it for a while. And then I had people die whilst I was in that, and, it affected me. And then my dad died, and that affected me strongly. But they were just practice runs for that extraordinary experience I had with Mom. So my mind didn't do the default fairy tale death where you have to be, all in garb and, oh my God, it's terrible. Why can't we say, oh my God, it's wonderful that I had 70 years with her? Could have been 50. Why can't we say, oh, you see what I mean? There is another way to engage your mind. So the result isn't selfishly suffering, beating yourself up. And what I mean by selfishly, it's like a little self-obsessed to grieve and be blah, blah, blah. I know I'm going to trigger some people, enjoy the triggers. No, and I say this, I think I talked to you about this. It was very evident to me in my dad's death that I had to have my shit together because everyone else didn't. First of all, he had a chaotic life. His wife, that's another story, which was my aunt, but that's another story. I know. He was like beating his chest. Why did you leave me? Why did you leave me? Just at the moment of if there is a consciousness in that body, the poor guy should have died a little bit in peace so his consciousness had a little bit of a chance to have a better passage to wherever people go or minds go after that, But instead, he's having this, the body being, and then the same happened with my mom. Some of my siblings had a terrible grieving reactions, textbook, fairy tale, selfish. Oh my God, you're leaving me. My life will be different. Who's thinking about the poor bastard on the table? It's probably the most important time of transition from I'm used to being in a body and I'm used to being a human, and now everything is deconstructing. And if you need peace and quiet and blissfulness and like a little bit of a have a good journey, that's the time. If you think about it for a little bit. So that's why I'm saying selfish, So it's selfish to cry and pour your blood and tears all over the person who's actually having the experience. You're not having the experience of dying. They are. So for me, after years of doing the death meditation, it was important for me to recognize that the main thing I could do was to create enough positive imprints in my mum's mind through whatever she could master. Sounds. Remember I told you I played her childhood songs, and so there was a smile and, all the good things that I could do, I would do. So her mind was in the highest joyful, blissful wisdom. I knew she grew up Catholic. And so I returned her mind to being Catholic. I put the rosary in front of her. She touched the rosary. And so I knew her emotions were flooded with positive, meaningful experiences. And the theory is if you're in a good state of mind, tomorrow you're probably more likely to be in a good state of mind. If you're in a shitty state of mind today, tomorrow you're likely to be in a shitty state of mind, especially at death. You know, if your mind leaves this experience with a really bad imprint, like someone beating your physical body, you know, and you're like shocked, that's probably not a good way to go on a journey, you know. And if your mind is at peace, or if your mind is in the highest joy, so in the Tibetan system, you try and think of the highest wisdom you gained in this life. So when you go through the death experience, you're likely to encounter your mind showing you that. And that creates your next experience of being, is the theory, you know?
So I know that in Tibet, they have like a very long ritual.
49 days. Yeah.
Maybe you can tell us a little bit more.
So there's a bunch of theory based on logic on what happens at death, right? So I really like this topic. I know nobody talks about it, but it's the topic everyone should talk about, so they're not shocked and afraid when death is coming their way, because it's coming.
Well, it's also one of my favorite topics. I love talking about it. So we're just going to do a death dance here today.
I think about death almost all the time.
Yeah. And so as we're thinking about death, right, we'll create a framework of reference for when the eventuality of that occurs. You only have those files to draw from, because you won't have conscious awareness enough to direct your mind like you would in meditation, because it's too late. Everything's breaking down. It's like the rocket ship's breaking up. You're not going to go, I wonder if I should look at where the sheets are on the bed so I'll make it all nice. You know, like you're just in, everything's deconstructing. So you got no time really to focus on anything. So you're only on the inertia of what you've put in the file system throughout your life. And I know that because I had a friend in Australia who, before safety was a thing, we were teens, sort of 17 or something. There's these cliffs, like the White Cliffs of Dover in Manly Beach. So if you climb up, there's these cliffs right down to the ocean, like really high cliffs down to the ocean, like life is there, right? And death. And many people jump off of those cliffs to end their lives. And so we'd go and sneak up there at night when the full moon was up. And just to get that peak of fear, you know, like we all get like teenage fear going to the edge. So I was in awe of the ocean just roaring beneath us. I was like this close to the edge, my feet, like the wind on my face. I'm like, oh, this is like a heart pumping, you know. And he comes from behind me. He grabs my shoulders and he does this to me and says, tell your mom I saved you. There's zero control there. Like your body just reacts. And your mind reacts. You see what I mean? Like I was safe. He was just playing with stupid teenagers. But that showed me that there is no meditation that can get me at peace at that moment. You know, when life is threatened, you're on autopilot. And autopilot is not random.
Yeah.
Autopilot is all the stuff you put in the files of your mind through every experience in your life, every time you encountered death, every time you encountered fear, every book you read about death and fear, how you think about it. So the death meditation is really useful because you can frame that experience as perhaps being a transition to something stronger, better. It's not guaranteed. It's based on your own mind. Remember, we talked about emptiness, the pain. Is this the world coming this way, or is the world being framed by whatever thoughts we've got in our mind? So if the world is framed, this is like the highest teaching from the Buddha. It's not to have a peaceful human life. As soon as you're born, you're guaranteed to die. The point of wake-upism, Buddhism, is to change the trajectory to that moment, for that moment not to be death, but maybe to be something more extraordinary. It doesn't have to be death from its own side. If your mind has a different framework, that same experience, heart pumping, elements dissolving, mind being free from the constraints of physicality, you can have an extraordinary experience of being that might be called Buddhahood, might be called something else. It doesn't have to be death.
Yeah.
So that takes a lot of files.
Yeah. I mean, the mind is so interesting. I love this idea of using this metaphor of the files, because I've sat a lot of 10-day Vipassana retreats, and I always like the first 4 days of silence, 3 days, 4 days.
I find it's just like your mind kind of regurgitating or throwing up like all the, and you're meditating, but then you're like watching a rerun of some TV show you watched 6 months ago in your mind's eye. And then you're like back into reality and you're like, whoa, where'd that come from?
Yeah. I have a friend who did 3-year retreat. Same. He's like, after a few years, you run out of stories and then the mind starts throwing what happened to you in high school, in primary school. And eventually you can quiet it down, but you still got to go through the files.
Yeah. And it's sort of like a little bit like waves maybe too, right? Because you do reach these states where the mind kind of like is quiet and still, but it takes some time to get there.
When you stop the distraction, when you get good at the muscle of returning to your object of meditation, it's really when you can see that your mind has gone off to the files. And then you're also the watcher of the mind, right? So it's a bizarre experience to realize you're experiencing yourself. So when you identify more with the observer of you, you recognize that all the thoughts, that you don't have to listen to them. They're just old files returning, old boomerangs, being Australian. They're just old boomerangs, so they're just bigger. When they come back, they tend to be more of the same boomerang. And so once you become the watcher, and in meditation systems of Tibetan Buddhists, that's called Shishin, the observer of the mind. That's sort of the alarm bell that says, you're not on your object of meditation. You're gone off to the files or distracted. So when that alarm goes off, the guard goes off and says, go back with joy to the thing you were trying to habituate to be on, So that's such a powerful exercise. Then who do you identify with? Are you the infinite observer, or are you the files spewing out from the never-ending throwing boomerangs?
Yeah.
It's like when you get that bug in your computer and all the windows come up. You're not the computer either. You're just watching the computer.
Excellent.
Yeah.
It's like, but you're still quite frustrated.
Yeah. And you shake the computer, right? You're like, it's creating more files. Yeah.
It's something interesting that's happened for Harmony and I is thinking about quieting is like over the course of our podcast, it's been 4 years now, maybe 5 years that we've been doing this podcast. We do it every week. And very early on in the podcast, 5 years ago, there was a deep vritti in our consciousness, which was the loss, not just of our teacher, but the loss of our teacher's respect. Status. So many of the conversations were about the pain and suffering of how do we frame Sri K. Pattabhi Jois. And we have, experiences of him, and then there are experiences projected onto him that we disagree with, but then realizing that we've also projected our own understanding onto him. And it was watching over the course of years as we continued to regurgitate this conversation about, how about this projection of the self. And now we don't really talk about him much anymore. And then the whole thing has died down.
But it's still kind of there in the background, I would say a little bit.
Yeah.
Because also many people in our community had their own experiences of him, and some people in the community haven't had any experiences of him because he's passed.
Sometimes people come on the show and it's like, oh, this is my opportunity to talk about this.
Yeah. And it really was a point that like kind of fractured, I think, the community or divided it.
Fractured into splintered.
Yeah, splintered.
Not
maybe.
Divided.
Yeah, splintered. Splintered is a good metaphor into all kinds of different sort of directions. So, it's just very interesting. It's kind of fascinating how that happens when a community kind of splinters and divides, when the leader kind of has a fall from grace.
So when you were on the show before, you saw something in my face, which was you saw that I had become triggered by a thought object. And I think that's why we all decided that we should come back on the show, is to kind of talk about this kind of, call it an implosion in a spiritual community. And you had experienced this yourself with your teacher, Geshe Michael Roach. And I wondered if we could kind of maybe just start from the beginning and talk about, how you met?
Yeah, of course. It's so funny. I just had this same question. There's a documentary being made of him by Netflix guys.
Netflix has realized that cult documentaries make big
No,
money,
I know,
and they're all
But-
over it.
Yeah.
But I think these guys, first and foremost, people are interested to get happy. Okay. And so
Yeah.
for things that are promising real happiness, there's a heightened trigger of fear, which is the natural human condition. We err on the side of catastrophizing things. But like you said, Russell, the promise of a spiritual practice is that you'll be free of suffering. The irony is that we attack it when there's a hint of something amiss. Yeah. And so our minds, our thoughts obsess about, well, that's not right. To the detail, like, my teacher being a monk, I got permission from his teacher to let his hair grow for a particular practice. So he's got long hair. And for those that didn't have that conversation with his teacher and him, monks and nuns included, who are supposed to be all holy, there was some attacks of hair.
Yeah.
You see what I mean? So we all on this rock floating in space without any visible signs of anyone else hanging around us. We are like crabs caught in a bucket wanting to get out, and we're crawling and pulling down all the other crabs to get out. It's our instinct to hurt each other as we're trying to. And it's a fear response. And the higher the promise, the higher the fear. And if you don't have your fear or your logic or your reasoning or your personal lived experience clear, which is another thing, right? And it's not just a spiritual community. I mean, I ran large organizational change programs in companies that are 5,000 people or more for governments and the rest. And whenever there's any change of guard, the CEO's changed, the vision's changed. The first instinct is protect myself by hurting someone else. Protect myself by blaming someone else. I do it instinctively still. If I find some dissonance, my guards go up. Lucky I have a meditation practice enough to recognize that if I allow my guard to go up too high, I'm not saying drop it altogether, because there's a reason why the guard goes up. But if you can investigate, what am I protecting? And is that reasonable? And what's my strategy for protecting? Will I hurt someone while I'm protecting? That's not reasonable, because I am then eating the poison of being hurt in the future. If I hurt, push away. That's why there's all these vows on speaking kindly and not harming others and the rest. So you don't collect the causes in the file of your own mind, in the boomerang file, to have to experience the result of attacking someone. So the guard goes up because something is amiss. That's good. I want to protect something holy. That's great. Not good. It's great. The strategy to protect something cannot be throwing missiles, because that will result in more missiles. Well, that's where we go amiss. Yeah, so I acknowledge that in the Tibetan Buddhist community, the Dalai Lama was attacked for being weird, There's no one's holy here. No one's allowed to be holy in the bucket of crabs, which is a rock floating in space where everyone's triggered because they don't want to be hurt. No one's holy, okay? Every religion's been targeted. The cancel culture was way before the COVID epidemic. And then the religious dogmatic crowd can get together and have the crusades. We've got the right to harm. And you don't have the right to harm lest you want to be harmed, So I don't know if that answered your question, but what I want to highlight is I'm not shocked anymore to have those conversations.
I was just going to say, as an aside, this conversation reminds me of a months-long feud I had with a cleaning lady in a Buddhist temple in Seoul, Korea, who's driven, I'm sure, beside herself with rage by my inability to do any of the things right in the Buddhist temple. But I was there every morning to meditate. She didn't like it.
No. So
furious.
My teacher has controversies on the web. I've got people having opinions about me because I run Three Jewels in an irreverent way. I'm not a monk, or, I say inappropriate jokes, inappropriate jokes. So people will have opinions, and the loudest opinions are the ones that trigger that response, the strategy to hurt, to protect. Oh my God, the alarms go off, So, this person that put some article on Reddit about me quoted me having an inappropriate joke with a friend of mine. They didn't know they were friends. And so suddenly she's triggered that I am abusive to my students or something. And so
Reddit's perfect for that. It's an ideal forum to make people feel worse about themselves.
We love it. News has been that forever. We love it. We eat it up. The controversy, the fear, we eat it up. Yeah, we do. It gives us a sense of being, and righteous also. My teacher's method, which used to frustrate me a ton. So he would be attacked online when online began, or people wrote articles and so on. All I wanted to do is get on there and protect it. That's not true because I had this experience. And he's like, do not want you to do that.
Geshe Roach we're talking about.
And I'm like, yeah. But it's incorrect what they quoted. It's incorrect what they said. I was there. And he's like, the more you engage, the more that feeds that thing. That will come. If you're experiencing it, it's your boomerang. You must have talked that way about people in the past. So let it ripen and let it die. Let it ripen and let it die. Do not address it. Do not address it. And, I had lived close to him for so long. I had clarity about what I saw. But my clarity is not everybody else's clarity. And so there's a lesson in there for me as a practitioner. Each one of us lives an experience of life dependent on the kind of files we've collected in our lives, and according to Buddhism, the lives before. And we're under the hypnosis of that's the truth. But it's the illusion that I see Hector saying something triggering to that guy. It's an illusion for that person. It's not an illusion for me. And this is where practitioners and humans get disoriented. We do not acknowledge our own life experience. This come to Jesus moment I had with all wanting to defend my teacher from what people were saying, where I thought, that's not true. That's not true. I had a moment where I had to question, am I following the wrong person? Am I studying from the wrong person? Because everybody seemed to, as in your community, as there was divides and splinters within the community, and then everybody jumps in town. I had to question, am I? And, it hurt to question it because I'd never questioned it until I read other people's opinions about my experience of my teacher. Right?
Other people's experiences of your experience.
So when I read them, and this is probably one of the deepest human sufferings, I too was lured into the doubt. Maybe my experience was wrong. And I had 3 days where I really spent time meditating and questioning and contemplating. Could I have gotten it wrong? Reviewed 10 years of experiences, reviewed 10 years of study, reviewed 10 years of application for 3 days. If I was sure in those 10 years that I was doing the right thing, studied the right thing, it made sense, it gave me results, why would I spend a minute? If I was sure for 10 years that I had been doing it for the right reasons, that it's working, that it's correct, that the translations are real, etc., why would I question it for 3 days? If I had a doubt, I've fixed it in 10 years. But suddenly, an internet article, high authority, someone's opinion, a news story, whatever the trigger is, makes the human mind question your own experience of being. Oh my God, if I had not had the discipline to question my mind, to analyze what's my experience, what's someone else's experience, is this valid? Can I see their experience in my experience and still side with my experience? Like if I didn't have analysis, if I didn't have reason and logic, if I didn't have a lived experience, I could see how easy it would be to jump on the bandwagon of bringing down anything that felt fearful. So suddenly in those 3 days, I realized if I don't stand up for my own experience and live by my truth, I will never be happy. I have to live by my truth, the experience I actually had, and not someone else's opinion of the experience I should have had. If I tried to live that experience, I would never, ever get to the core of my being, ever. So then I had to eat my own pill of logic and go, you're going to have to enjoy that people will throw stuff at you for being Geshe Michael's student, for running an organization that's based on Tibetan Buddhism. Because, I mean, there are parts of the world that don't want us to talk about Tibet as Tibet, you know. I'm going to have to live by my conviction. And am I sure that my conviction is they're good boomerangs? They're boomerangs of insight and wisdom, compassion and logic and reasoning? Or are they just Instagram boomerangs or TikTok boomerangs that are just trendy, you see what I mean? That's the choice I had to make. And I made the best choice of my life. I spent time questioning my mind and I came out on the side of I did the right thing and I'm doing the right thing and I'm going to continue to do the right thing because it's yielding results in my life. And other people's opinions, as loud as they are, whatever the logos are, I can acknowledge they can be their opinions. I can acknowledge that they could have had that experience. And I don't have to try and convince them otherwise. They're going to have their own come to Jesus moments, whether or not they're yelling from the rooftops to bring other people down because they're triggered or because they actually genuinely think something bad's going on.
You must have seen this film, Crazy Wisdom, about Chogyam Rinpoche in Colorado. It's a phenomenal documentary about his life, kind of A to Z. And I was quite taken with him. At the end of it, I was left with a sense of loss that I hadn't had an opportunity to meet him and study with him, as crazy as he is. And, you know, the cocaine and the drinking and the lovemaking with his students. You know, so Pema Chodron was asked, you know, how is Chogyam Rinpoche able to maintain his enlightenment with the cocaine and the drinking and the women like this? And Pema, at the very end of the film, says, I don't know how he did it. But the implication being that he was pure of mind from her. And Pema Chodron, like, you respect Pema Chodron. Like, she's, you know, she's got gravity, she's got weight. And in the same way, you know, I deeply respect you and the vibration that comes from, you know, my relationship to Hector, just the vibration that I see radiating from you is self-evident. And it's like, well, but wasn't there, like, you know, like sex and stuff in Arizona? Didn't somebody die? You know, like, all of this stuff is, you know, but and people say, well, yeah, didn't Patabi Joycelyn rape somebody? You know,
he didn't.
But like, you know, what is self-evident?
Depends how you define that.
What is self-evident in front of you? You know, and I really appreciate what you just said. Like, yeah, there's this truth that's in front of you.
What I was saying is that Geshe Michael's like, just leave it alone because the karma will die. The more attention you pay for it, the more it'll flare up, right? So just let it live its course. We must have shared karma. Yeah. We must have talked weird about other people in the past. I'm getting to see his perspective more, but, you know, being a young practitioner, I didn't feel that way early on. And so, you know, the way I see it now because I have to answer this question every time I invite people to take on deeper teachings at Three Jewels. I'm like, you got to understand that deeper teachings come from this, and there's a story, and people have opinions. You're welcome to your opinion.
Mm-hmm.
I see it as a ring of protection. I see it as a ring of fire. For me, I have never tasted such wisdom ever in my life. Not wisdom that understood how my mind creates the experience of being and the experience of experiencing being. Yeah. I only understood that thanks to Geshe Michael's translation of entire Tibetan Buddhist system, incredible books on philosophy that I would have never picked up were it not for his kindness. Yeah. His entire life dedicated to learning Sanskrit, Tibetan, 20 years in a monastic system with a High Lama, also student of the teacher of the Dalai Lama, Ken Rinpoche, abbot of the highest monastic settings in Tibet when he got bombed in 59. Like, were it not for meeting this Western, the first American Geshe in the Tibetan system, the second Westerner, the first American in 1,000 years of monastics, if I had not met him, learned what he translated, because he didn't make up anything. It's not like Geshe Michael's got teachings. Geshe Michael just grabbed and put it in English and said, but this is what you practice in the West, because we're not Tibetan, so we don't have yaks and we're not nomads. But the philosophy says this, and here's the commentaries and 20,000 references, and it's pristine. Like I've gone to other centers. If I did not have that, I know what my life would be like at 57. And it's not pretty. I have siblings, I have friends I went to school with. The thing in my mind, as untamed as my mind can be, still, the thing in my mind is like an unshakable thing now. And so, do I defend that, or do I just become an example of living that? And so, the world, the bucket of crabs that we all are, highly triggered because we don't understand where reality comes from. We don't understand what good things happen to bad people, what bad things happen to good people. We don't understand, really. I've worked for hundreds of companies, thousands of people, hundreds of CEOs and executives. They don't have a clue how they're going to get profit next week. Zero clue. But they have all the language and all the strategy that no one's guaranteed anything. And this market changes minute to minute. This, social. There's zero clue on the planet of what happens in the next minute. Yeah. With the current state. And so, of course, we're triggered and we're afraid and we're just crabs crawling each other, because if someone gets a little bit of prosperity, I want more, so I'm going to protect this thing. Of course, with that, that's the human condition. And now, thanks to this translation of ancient wisdom, my heart genuinely moves to compassion, even to the shittiest, worst attacker. Even like it moves to, I wish your mind didn't have to experience what you just planted, what boomerangs you just put in your head, because it's not going to be good for you. And you don't know that. You think you're protecting something. So whenever I see people attacking, especially pathways to freedom in whichever system, it breaks my heart. It breaks my heart. But it is a ring of protection, because if your motivation isn't pure enough to actually want to transcend your suffering, if you're actually not strong enough to look at your own causes of suffering, which begins by acknowledging death is coming, and am I ready for it? If you're not prepared for that, the path will burn you. If your mind isn't clear that you should take some responsibility for transforming, the path itself will burn you, will make you more triggered. So it keeps the people that can't have the capacity to practice out. And those that have either the tenacity or the, there's some weird people that say, I want to practice yoga to the point of where I want to practice meditation to the point where I'm enlightened. those people, they're going to endure the pain,
Yeah.
and they're going to endure the problems, and they're going to endure sitting there looking at their minds and not listening to their mind saying, you're a piece of shit, you're worthless, you're not good. They're going to push through that, because as soon as you sit in meditation, the first thing you notice is how much garbage there is inside of you. That's hard to stomach. And so I think that these controversies, these things are now like a ring of protection for those practitioners that actually want to dive deep and have a real experience of being. Because it's not easy to go inside and look at, you're responsible for your own reality.
It struck me at a certain point that the thing that we had done, which we had done before it was cool.
Yeah.
We had done it when it was just us, and it was, our little nerdy thing that we did all by ourselves, and nobody else did, and nobody had yoga mats in grocery stores on sale. And then we watched it become really cool. And then very suddenly it wasn't cool anymore. I was like, oh, here we are. We're still we're back right where we started doing this thing that isn't that cool. But it means a lot to us.
You had, and the people in your generation of practitioners. Yeah. The same happened with Ram Dass's generation, right? They're like in there. And the same happened to, what was her name? Alexandra David Neal, the first woman to ever walk into Lhasa dressed as a monk. I don't know if you know about her. She's amazing.
No, that sounds amazing.
She was a French princess or something, and she's like, screw you all, I'm going to Tibet. And they're like, you can't go to Tibet, you're a woman. So she kept trying, was rejected to enter Lhasa. And she dressed up as a monk, and in there and this is in the late 1800s, early 1900s, right? And so they're and so they were all interested in, what was that? The occult, or whatever they called it at that time, the hidden
theosophy.
That's right. I think she was the head of the theosophy, whatever. So anyway, so there's been waves of humans who want to transcend the limited suffering that humans experience all the time. They want to really get out of the crab bucket, and the strategy is not crawling over all the other crabs, which makes you fall down further. There's got to be another strategy, right? So it might feel like drowning, fill up the bucket with water, and then suddenly everyone gets out. I don't know what I just made that up. It might be another metaphor.
Yeah.
No, but that's
like
what
that
it feels
one.
like, right? To devote yourself to a practice, to give yourself to a lifelong practice, might feel like drowning, might feel like not what being human feels like. So that will transcend your experience of being. Looking at the things that humans don't want to look at, taking responsibility for things that don't seem to be your responsibility, but with logic and understanding, you're like, I'm the only one having this experience. So can I shift my way of creating that experience? All I'm saying is that your generation did something cool. This generation's also doing something cool. We won't see their results until they're 50, and they look back and go, everyone else was on TikTok. I went to Three Jewels. I studied the Diamond Cutter Sutra, or whatever they did. I went to a yoga studio. I met a teacher, and that teacher was my doorway to question the way I experienced life. And you have it in Dan Millman's Way of the Peaceful Warrior book. You have it in The Alchemist, by Coelho. It's not just Buddhists that own enlightenment. Enlightenment is available for every human being. There is a path. What's cool about the Tibetan Buddhists is that they were just good scribers about all the detail. So there's volumes and volumes and volumes. Like when Buddhism went from India to Tibet, the Lotsawas, the translators, they would write a reference. Is it a bibliography when you write, I got this teaching from... Yeah. So then there's a bibliography of every author for each commentary or each book, all the way back to the Buddha. And so you can say, well, this person got their teacher was this, and their teacher was that, and their teacher was this. And so you can be certain that the book you're reading has some authority if it's been cataloged since the time of the Buddha, or at least since the time of Tibet 1,000 years ago when it first came there. And so there'll be people in this generation, which, I'll be long gone, hopefully enlightened, hanging out with all the other people that are no longer crabs. should have used I should have used a different metaphor, butterflies, whatever, melting into
I like the crabs in a bucket.
crabs turn into.
Soup.
It's so weird because I've heard this metaphor from another
The crabs?
Australian. In the crabs in the Forest Sangha tradition at Chithurst, the abbot there in England was at the time in the 2000s was Australian, and he had just come out of a 6-month silent retreat, and it was his first time. He wanted to tell us all about it, and he said, "Yeah, I just realized it's just like a bunch of crabs on a plate. Everything in our mind, in our lives, you're just trying to keep one crab on a plate all the time and to get to the point where you've got to take refuge because it's too many crabs." I was like, it's like you're 20 years later, it's another
funny.
Australian talking to me about crabs. And I should really clean myself.
I mean, I now that I think about it, like, I like the metaphor of crabs because we put on a hard shell, but we're really soft and gooey inside,
Yeah.
tender, like we wear our skeletons on the outside. We are that. If you give yourself a second and not be overly triggered or overly romantic or overly achieving, what certainty do you have? There's not much that all the work that you're doing is going to really guarantee anything beyond just a temporal, impermanent, good result or average result. But everyone's ending in the same way. So we take refuge in trying to organize our lives to this little tiny thing that is a human life. Real refuge. I like that he said that after 6 months of real refuge, real protection. I mean, the technical protection of Buddhist refuge is think that the Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, the emptiness of the mind that experiences itself as enlightened, Buddha, the things that are experienced as things but are really empty of a nature. And so a piece of music can move you to tears so you can hate it. But the music is empty of a nature. It's dependent on the construct of your own mind, just like a Buddha's perception of themselves is dependent on the boomerangs they threw, right? And then the community of beings who have done that thing, that's the only protection the crabs have. The fact that nothing has the nature it appears to have, not even you. And therefore, if you know how to cause the right experience of being, of the world, and the beings of that world, then you can create yourself as an enlightened being, Buddha. Everything is bliss, dharma, and every being around you is bliss equally, sangha. So that's the only protection, the protection that understands the thing that's triggering me will pass. It's not existent from its own nature because someone else is not being triggered. Therefore, that isn't a trigger. Our mind's tricking me into the illusion. So I will focus on not throwing a shitty boomerang in response. I will manage my response. And that's real protection. You see, refuge means protection. The only protection is not acting bad to bad things. Because if you do, more bad things come. That will protect you from doing shitty things, throwing bad boomerangs. And then you're protected because you ain't getting bad boomerangs back after a while. Not immediately, after a while.
Yeah.
There's no other protection. You will always get back, you get back what you get.
I love everything you're saying, and it's bringing up a couple of things. First of all, one of my coaching instructors, she always says, if you have a trigger, it's in you. And I love that because, she's blending like Western psychology and Eastern teachings. And it's very much like, if you're getting triggered, it's because that thing is in you and it's coming to the surface. So now you get to see, like, what is that thing in me that needs to heal or needs to be seen, because it's always connected to some past hurt or wrong or feeling inferior or feeling like out of control. I need to protect, right? What is it that you're protecting? And you can kind of keep going a layer deeper and deeper and deeper. So what are you protecting? Well, I'm protecting myself. Well, are you in danger? And then keep going deeper, even like what self is there even to protect, right? I mean, that to me is always the enlightened awareness is at the end of it, there is no self there to protect. There's just your personality, which is an illusion and made up of exactly all those files, those thoughts, those feelings, those impressions, those memories, those beliefs. But those beliefs are also
They're
an
all
illusion.
temporary
So
moments.
the you that you're protecting, doesn't even exist. So you don't actually need the protection.
I know, exactly.
So
But
now you're like, okay, now I'm like,
but at a certain
free.
point, I also demand justice.
No, there is no justice.
And I demand repercussions for other people's actions if they're harmful to others. And I want to see justice done.
No, but it's about your experience is your experience, but you can still act. You can still act in a positive way in the world, but you can only really truly act in a positive way in the world when you're not reacting from a place of
recently I heard the
defense,
Dalai
of
Lama
being
say,
triggered.
someone asked him, is there any time when you can be angry? Because anger is throwing a negative boomerang out there. And he's like, of course, but not when you're angry. You can put on the mask of anger. It was a brilliant answer. You can put on the mask of anger when it's needed.
And not when you're angry.
So if the child is running to the middle of the street and you have to yell or throw a chancleta at it or something, right? And be angry for the sake of the child, he's like, and then that's not called anger. That's infinite compassion. That's a good thing. Like if anger overruns you and you hurt other people to try and get justice, which is what you said, because they should hurt. Because I got hurt. They should hurt. That's not protection. However, like when I love that question of justice, what is justice, right? Is justice that someone must get their dues because I got a bad feeling, so they should hurt as much as I hurt? Or is justice the consequences, the must have consequences of every action? Because if you look at karma, right, which says every action has an equal and opposite reaction, especially the ones in our consciousness, there is no higher justice. There's no judgment there whether morally you should be hurt or morally you should be loved. It's just a simple equation. The more you love, the more you'll be loved. The more you hate, the more you'll experience being hated, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's perfect justice. There is, and that's what I think is amazing about the understanding of the universe in this way. If the laws of cause and effect, which include consciousness, which we call karma too, if that is the way that reality exists, it's an echo back of what we've put out. Yeah. If that's reality, then everyone's just, there is justice. And then there's a big debate, right? Is life and experience predictable, just, or is it random? Because you can't have both. You can't have sometimes random and sometimes caused, right? So this is a whole debate in Buddhism. And, the people that won the debate are the ones that things are caused. They're dependently arising. Nothing isn't coming out of nowhere for no reason at all. Yeah. And then they throw you what they call a prasangika, a ridiculous consequence, which is like, then a flower would grow in the sky, just out of nowhere. Like at any random moment, you would see flowers in the sky. And that's not the way that the world works.
Right.
On LSD it is. I've done that.
But
in fact, I've seen that.
But the consequence of seeing flowers in the sky and it meaning all those things that it mean to you are a result of something you put in your mind. So it's still, you can still have flowers in the sky in your mind, but not in external reality. It's a good debate.
All right, fair point.
I think that's so interesting. Like, because it is something that people, my mom, I always see, she ran into my son the other day in an elevator, totally
randomly.
Yeah.
What was she doing driving in an elevator?
His first response was compassion right away.
Like she was coming in and he was also going in.
They hit each other. It was terrible. It was terrible. It was
mess.
It
catastrophic.
was a
Sorry.
pleasant accident.
Oh no.
And I said, "Oh, what a nice coincidence," because that's, what you say. And of course, my mother is very anti-coincidence. So she writes back,
God had a plan.
nothing is an accident. And I was like, of
But,
course.
you know what you can use back with your
Sorry,
mum?
I'm
Because,
just-
I mean, I tend to be that way. My mum was a Virgo, so she'd sort of drilled, the party line. The fact that you can have extraordinary experiences, like maybe seeing a flower grow in the sky, like maybe walking on water when no one else can see you walking on water. Whenever you see a miracle of it's so random that I was thinking about my grandson and there he was. Yeah. But whatever. Those things are also projections of our minds caused, but for very few. You see what I mean? Like if you collect the particular causes to experience a surprise, a miracle, and of course that can happen. Someone did see the Virgin Mary appear in the rock of the cave, but only because their mind contained the boomerangs to force them to have that experience as real. Someone else in the same cave just saw a rock, 2 different boomerangs about the same place. And so you can go back to your mind and go, absolutely nothing, is coincidence, except you can cause coincidences.
Yeah, I mean, and that's really the interesting kind of component, I think, of that Buddhist cause and effect theory and reality, but that so much is caused by our mind, like much more so than things are caused physically.
We buy into
reality.
the physical cause and effect. In the West, that's our science, that's our religion, right? Buddhists say that's true. But so is every experience of consciousness, which is labeling all the external things in the first place. So much so that the Buddha taught mostly it's mind. And there was a school that grew, a school of philosophers called the mind-only school. And they have all these theories of where in your mind are stored all the seeds, and they call these alaya vijnana. And it's like a refrigerator in your brain. And then in there are all the seeds. And like they have all this theory of why everything is mind and mind only. Because the Buddha said, mostly it's mind. You work on the mind, then the rock is not rock anymore. It's magic rock. It's holy rock. It's special rock. And someone else says it's boring rock. It's dumb rock. It's stupid rock. The rock doesn't have that.
Yeah. Then you have you have Michelangelo who says, well, I saw the statue in the stone and just chipped away everything that wasn't the
statue. And we could have been triggered and going, what's wrong with you? Why are you seeing beautiful young men in stone? Pervert.
It's a beautiful young man everywhere, though.
Me too.
But that actually happened.
No, I know. I was just trying to bring Michelangelo here. If he made that quote in 2024, like someone will write an article about it.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah. I think that link to the feeling the need to protect either yourself or others because, and that being the impetus of negative reactions or negative attacks on people is it's kind of a beautiful connection when you can see it that way because it does evoke compassion.
Yeah, if you understand what's happening. Yeah.
The idea, it's coming from a place of wanting to do right or wanting to do good or wanting things to be nice or happy or pleasant
good,
for
healthy
people.
Yeah, it is. I mean, and I really do think that we just have the wrong strategy for trying to act on that hope. So I believe everyone has hope. And what we have a misunderstanding about is the strategy which will deliver that hope. And that's what I'm grateful for, having studied what I've studied and practiced what I studied and try and get it wrong and, and get it right and fail at it. But it served me in a way that nothing else on the planet has served me. And I can't give away the experience. I teach everywhere. I do teacher trainings. I do retreats. There's no amount of me saying words that will deliver someone else this experience for themselves. And that makes it like a little painful. What is the right words? There aren't any words. other people have to collect the good boomerangs themselves to not see themselves as crabs.
Other people have to collect the good boomerangs themselves, not to see themselves as crabs. Well, I just want to thank you so much for coming back on and having this conversation with us. It was beautiful.
Thank you.
Got so much more. We're more awake. You've done your job.
Wait, before you go, I'm excited to share a special opportunity with you, our Finding Harmony community. This March, come join me and Russell in this beautiful town of Gothenburg, Sweden for an immersive 10-day yoga journey from March 21st to the 30th. There's different options for you. There's 2 weekend workshops and a full week of Mysore. You can come for the full 10 days or split it up. It isn't just another yoga retreat, though. This is going to be a comprehensive exploration of practice, combining traditional asana with deep therapeutic work, meditation, and also deepening your esoteric understanding of the practice. We'll be diving into possibly some spinal energetics, some somatic practice, the art of back bending and hip opening, weaving together all of the philosophy and practical yoga tools and education you could want. This is going to be an amazing time, whether you're a seasoned practitioner or you're brand new to yoga. There will be something in this retreat for you. So I would encourage you to come. Bring your family, rent an Airbnb. Spaces are limited. So be sure you book your space now. And to learn more about this transformative experience and to secure your spot, you can visit my website, harmonyslater.com, or just shoot me a DM on Instagram. My handle is Harmony Slater Official, and I'll send you a link and you can find out all the information there. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. And if you enjoyed it, please subscribe and leave a review. Share with friends who might find these conversations valuable. Until next time, stay curious and keep exploring your magic.
That's it. We've concluded another episode of the Finding Harmony podcast. I just want to thank you so much for doing the work that changes the world, starting with yourself. It truly does make a huge difference. Please make sure you have your automatic downloads turned on wherever you listen so you don't miss any of the upcoming episodes. I have so much more magic I can't wait to share with you. Lastly, if you're on Instagram, I love connecting and hearing from you. So come on over and say hello at Finding Harmony Podcast. And you can also come say hello to me personally at Harmony Slater Official. Thank you again for being here. I cannot wait to share more with you in our next episode.